Hi, second grade. Welcome back to class with me, your teacher, Miss Emolyn Liden. I'm so excited about today's lesson because we are going to go on a field trip. We are going to go meet a designer and an architect, and his name is Joel Breaux, and he is from this area. He has made so many cool designs. He's going to talk to you about his process, and we're going to see some of the things that he has made. Then we're going to explore some forms on our own, and we are going to build some 3D structures to start the process of learning how to be an architect ourselves. In today's lesson, the supplies you will need are a pair of scissors, markers or crayons, and a glue stick. Gather those supplies and let's go on our field trip. Here's Joel.
Hey, second grade. Come on in. Hey kids, my name is Joel Breaux. I grew up in a little town called Laurelville, Louisiana, which is about 25 miles or so southeast of Lafayette. I am a designer. This is what I've done for at least 30 years. And what that means is I get involved in doing all kinds of projects, whether it's building related as in architecture, or furniture related like this chair, or public art memorials like this memorial that is for Abraham Lincoln's library. I discovered that I like design from a fairly early age. I always thought that I'd be an architect. I started building things as early as I could remember. I built models as a kid. I grew up next to a shipyard, so I had access to people fabricating things, and I saw that basically every day, all day long. My father worked at the shipyard, so I just was exposed to building things at a very young age, and always liked doing so. You know, it's what I live to do. I built everything as a kid. I built boats. I built models from scratch. I also built like models you could get at the drugstore there. I built a small like platform kind of building at my grandfather's in the pasture in the pig mud pit. You know, it was probably the first structure I ever built. I was probably I'm guessing about 12 or 13 years old at the time. You know, we built things to pull behind the three-wheeler just to see if we could get them airborne. We would build these things with wheels or just like sleds that we'd pull behind the three-wheeler to ride on. Bikes to jump them into the bayou to swim, right? Things that might float, we would build. A little bit of everything. Just as long as it was fun, you know, involved some kind of entertainment for us. If you're interested in building things and you're not necessarily sure how to make them, I would say that it's important to do a lot of experimentation, you know, experiment with materials, and to also, at least as a designer, you would look at what the experience is going to be. Like if for me as a kid, I was interested in making things, but they were directed by whether or not they would be fun to play with. You know, if you were pulling it behind a three-wheeler, it was, well, how well did it slide? Was it strong enough so that the rope wouldn't pull through this object? You know, so like allow experience to direct what you're making. This particular model is a model of a house, of a residence. It's basically what I would call a systems model. It's not meant to show the whole building. It's only meant to explain all the parts of the building, right? And that they could be assembled in different ways, kind of like a kit of parts for Tinker Toys or Lincoln Logs or what would be Legos, right? It's a system of parts that you can put together however you want. Same thing is true here. It's made up of just overall structure. These square panels are what would be basically almost like styrofoam with a metal surface on it. They can be made at different sizes so that they begin to overlap, and then the overlaps become structural components, right? These overlaps are like door or air conditioning, and what happens is every time there's some kind of an overlap or this insert into those spaces where these rectangles intersect, those things become structure. They become infrastructure in the sense of like it's air conditioning or a doorway or shelving. I start to think of them as experiences. Like each one has to be an experience, right? So like this is like a greeting. If you're entering the door and you have a friend's coming over, you're meeting this person at the door, and there's a moment where you have an experience with that person. Or there's wind passing through one and leaving the back of the house, right? That's an experience. Or sunlight coming up in through the top into the space. every time you have an infrastructure moment, you have a structure moment, but you also have an experiential moment. This project is for Abraham Lincoln. I'm assuming you know who that is. Maybe, maybe not. Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. This is a memorial for his library that's in Springfield, Illinois. This is me. Oh, this is your parents. This is you. This is the height of this project. Bottom half of this is basically the things that he wrote from his earlier age up until the time that he died. It's his own writings, and they start from the bottom when he's younger towards the end of his life. The top of this, however, are basically the influence of his writings and the influence of his life, and there are a series of words on here that have to do with how people perceived his impact, and that's all going to be on one side. On the front side, it's basically cut through with like a laser. They're going to cut through that surface, and the words are going to be on here. On the back side, however, the words are cut through on a laser, but there's a light on the inside of this thing that takes the words themselves and shines them onto the building. It works kind of like a projector, right? And that on the inside, the lights are moving around so that the text on the building and the letters on the building are also moving around, making it seem like this stuff is still in motion. This is a chair that I had worked on a while back, and as I was saying, everything, for me at least, starts out with what kind of experience do I want to generate. I'm sure that you guys have seen photographs on the internet that have a lot of pixelated images. You know, like photographs nowadays are basically made up of little bitty squares, right? And if you blow up the image, you'll start seeing these little bitty squares. I felt like I could take that kind of experience and apply it to a person. That if a person sat in this chair, normally when you sit in a chair, you just feel like your weight, your own gravity is just one monolithic kind of weight that's sitting down in the chair. My interest was in taking somebody's weight and pixelating it. Imagine if you had your gravity, like right now you think of gravity all as one object, like you're one object, but if you could separate your gravity into bit blocks, right? So let's say you weigh 60 pounds, and instead of one 60-pound object, you had 60 objects that were just 1 pound each. So if you could take all your weight and break it up into 60 little bitty squares, and somehow that's how this would be represented when you sat on this chair. If you sat on this chair, instead of feeling 160-pound weight, you would sense that your weight is broken up into smaller units. So just about every project that I work in starts out as sketching. This particular project is in Ruston, North Louisiana, and what you're seeing here are basically sketches for some ideas about benches. So sketches eventually become architectural drawings, which is what this is. If you see one to the other, you can kind of see how they relate to each other. Like this shape is the same as this shape. And we'll take that information and it is made into a rendering. So this here is a computer-generated rendering of the same bench. Same process though, it starts out as sketches, right? And then the sketch basically turns into more of a concrete drawing, so you can see the relationship between this plan view and this plan view. Is that this one is still a little bit schematic, but this becomes more realistic in the sense that there's a lot of dimensions and the scale is pretty much set in stone, to something that is a rendering again with people inside of it. Kind of see here that this is what it looks like from the outside. This is a similar view, so it's just about an idea at this point. It's not about how do we make this, it's solely about what does this mean and what kind of information does this convey to a viewer. This project is a house, but instead of a typical house where the rooms are all in sequence, like they're spaces next to spaces and you walk from one room to one room to one room, this house works differently. The way that this house works is that there's this circular, almost like a hamster wheel in the center of it. And this hamster wheel basically has these openings cut out of it. So as a person walks on this thing, this whole cylinder rotates, right? Like this thing will turn around. And as a person's walking on it, an opening in this wheel will reveal like a bunch of cabinets, which is basically the kitchen, right? So that a person can keep walking, and then this goes down into the floor and it reveals the bedroom, right? so that a person can keep walking. And then the living room is revealed because there's a television and there's some bookcases and things like that. Does that make sense? Okay. Point is, doesn't matter how creative or unusual an idea is, you can always figure out a way to bring something into fruition. That just about anything can be made, and I would encourage you guys to take whatever ideas you have, no matter how outlandish they may be, no matter how crazy they may sound, and figure out a way to build those things. How do you make something that just hasn't been done yet? So just as an example, the materials that I usually use are sometimes wood, sometimes they're rubber or plastics or steel can stretch like this if you try hard enough, right? Glass, I just use a lot of different materials in my projects. But no matter what materials I use, I try to take them and put them into a way that it gives somebody an experience. So with something like this, you could take these two things, point them at somebody, and you don't actually have to shoot it at somebody, but people will sense the tension in there, right? It'll sense that it has the potential to kind of do harm. That's the language of architecture, right? The language of design is that we take different materials and we put them together in a way that gives somebody an experience. That's what it's all about. All right, well, I think that's about it. So good to talk to you guys. I hope that this has given you some ideas, and I hope that you look at how you're going to make your own ideas happen. You guys have a good day.
When Joel Breaux works, he thinks about things like being an architect, what it means to be a designer, and how to make things with forms and models before he jumps in and makes an entire sculpture or an entire building. We are going to decorate this piece of white paper as a landscape. We're going to imagine if we're looking down and this is a garden or a town or a city, and we're looking like if we were a bird far, far away down onto the landscape. Take some markers or some crayons that you would see in nature, and let's color in something. So let's imagine if this was a lake. What else could you landscape if you wanted to make a garden, for instance? We can put some structures in the garden, and we can have all kinds of shapes. We could do pathways. We're just adding some dimension to the white piece of paper with some shapes. It's almost like doing a map, but in this case, you're giving an idea of what you're going to build. And maybe there's a pathway that goes off here. You're welcome to do anything that you would like to do. If you want to do a cityscape, you can do straight lines like a sidewalk. What if there was a sidewalk at the edge of this garden? So you can color in sidewalks. And what if you wanted to what if you worked with a team of people and you wanted to tell them that there was a tree here, so we couldn't put a building there, and there was a tree here, so you can't put a building there. So these are shapes that we are looking at from up above to help us map out our design of a place. So I'm imagining a garden. You could imagine a town or a city. It is up to you. Okay, so let's put a form here, a form here, and a form here. And we're going to practice making these forms, these plans, so that later on the architect will know what we want to make. we've been folding a lot this year. We're going to fold a form by putting the paper landscape, which means the paper is out to the side longer than it is tall. And we're going to fold it in 3 folds so that we can make a triangular form that will stand up. Open it up, and we're going to fold one more time, and we can use this line to show us where to fold. And we know that triangles have 3 sides. So we want 1, 2, and 3 folds. So we need one more. There we go. 3 folds, and now you cut. See how it's already curving up? It already wants to fold together. We're going to cut on this line, and then we'll have 1, 2, 3 rectangles that we can then fold and glue together. Now, if you put these 3 together, look, you have a triangle. Good. Now what we're going to do is, this is very tall, so we're going to cut it in half, and we're going to pretend that we have a gazebo in the garden, and we can actually measure this, and we can tell our architect how tall this would be in real life. But I want you to just use your imagination and cut this in half. And now it is much shorter, and we can have our form like that. Now if you have a piece of tape, you can tape the form up and over. A great way to glue this together, because it meets like a triangle, is to use our last part of the fold, and we can actually go up and over and glue it down. So experiment like Joel Breaux said, where you use all kinds of supplies, and try to make the supplies work for you. So in this case, we can glue it here, fold it, and then glue it down on the other side. And if you like to make forms, you could experiment with, we've folded it in half, we could even glue it on the inside of that triangle. Isn't that cool? Let's try that. So take your glue stick and put glue on one side of the triangle. Put glue on one side of this rectangle, and we're going to glue it on the inside of our triangle, just like that. And half of it is going to stay unglued. So I've glued half of it to the triangle. See that? Then put glue on the other side. And when we reach this side together to create our triangle shape, see, there's our triangle, we are then going to press the piece of paper down on the glue, and we have a really nice form of a triangle. And we can pretend it's a gazebo, we can pretend it's a tower, and we can place it anywhere that we would like on the page. Good. Next, let's do a cylinder, and you can use the same piece of paper. I'm going to move my tower to the side, and I want the cylinder to be a little bit shorter. So if it's over by the pond, it could be a little dock to hang out on at the pond. So roll your paper this time. We're not going to do folds, we're going to do a roll. So we're going to curve it around, and we're going to reach it to the other side. You can make it small or you can make it larger. It is up to you. And we're going to see the paper touches right about here. So draw a line And we are going to cut along the line, okay? As straight as you can, cut along the line. And since you are the designer, you can decide if you want it to be this tall, it's taller than our tower, or if you want it to be half as tall, like a little gazebo or a little porch. And I would like mine to be half as tall. So if that's the case, cut it in half. Cylinders are a little bit easier, so we're going to check our work, and we notice that it overlaps. And if it overlaps, then we need the glue to be on the inside, because this is on top, right? Inside. So put the glue on the inside of one side, and then when you roll it up, that is going to be glued. So we're going to tuck it in, roll it up, and press your fingers where the glue is. Give your glue a chance to dry. And then where would you like this gazebo to be? Here by the lake. That looks great. Let's experiment with one more form. We have a tower by the tree. We have a gazebo by the lake. Let's do a form where we need 4 folds. And I would like this one to be nice and short as well. Okay? So if we do 4 folds, it's going to look like what? 4 folds is going to look like a skyscraper. And we can make it shorter and pretend, that it's a barn or a house. If you did a cityscape, then a skyscraper would be really, really tall, right? Let's see here. 1, 2. We're trying to create a square shape. See that? Good. This is going to work. So fold 2. One more time. And our leftover is the perfect flap. We always need a part of the paper to glue, right? You can try and experiment with tape, but we're using glue as well. So use the last part that's left over to fold it over. Check your corners, check your edges, and try to make this a nice straight fold. Wonderful. Now can we make a square shape that is 3D and it becomes a tower? There we have a square. Here we have a rectangle. We have the flap to glue, and if we would like to glue it on the inside, then we put the glue right here and we tuck it inside and we can glue it. Let's do that. Unfold your paper. If you need to mark where you're gluing, so this is the glue, and I want it to be here. You can mark a little mark to show you exactly where it needs to go, okay? So that when you lay it down in order to get your glue on the paper, you know where to put the glue. My glue stick is big. If you have a smaller one, it might work a little bit better. Then I see if I can make a square again. I tuck it in inside, edge it up, press with your fingers, and have you created a nice tall form. Wonderful. Now we've got a gazebo, and if you want it shorter, you can cut it. Beautiful, by the lake. And what if we want to turn this into 2 buildings? You can flatten it, cut it in half, and say, this is the house, this is the barn. What if we put the barn next to the gazebo? And this is the tower, because over here we could build a big castle. Nice job, second grade. I hope you enjoyed exploring forms, models, and what it means to be an architect and a designer with Joel Breaux. Good work creating your art today. All right, second grade, I hope you had fun meeting an architect like Joel Breaux and learning more about his process and how he makes things. I'm so glad you joined me today. I hope you're proud of your art project and that it has inspired you to keep making things. We will see you again next time, and until then, keep making art.